All right, it begins. Welcome to the second annual Lincoln observance of the annual Cannabis Liberation Day, a global day of solidarity with over 300 cities worldwide. And we're all in solidarity to win cannabis liberation. We're sick of the war on cannabis, we're sick of the lies, and we're here to do something about it. So now, to begin this, we'll start with an invocation. I'd like to sanctify all the herb that has been and will be smoked today on Cannabis Liberation Day. So, being the Sabbath, I assume that this would be the right thing. Because here on this Sabbath day, I appreciate my Creator, and I appreciate the wonders of creation. I thank my God for the seed-bearing herb. I thank God for the cannabis seed-bearing herb. I thank Him for the samples that we get to have and the cool company we get to share them in. God, forgive America for making cannabis illegal and what it's done to me and so many other people in the name of their filthy war on drugs. But with your help, Lord, and with the help of these activists, we're going to do something about it. So in Jesus' name I praise and pray, amen. Now here's something I've been wanting to get on tape for a while, so if you can indulge me. I'm not really stalling, I just want to get this on tape. You see, this is not a big pop party, this is a First Amendment demonstration. As a First Amendment demonstration, we have a right to assemble. You have a right to hear what I have to say. I have the right to say what I came here to say. It's a two-way street as far as the right of free speech goes. Your right to say and your audience's right to hear. That is why they cannot charge me for a sound system. That is why they cannot force me to buy insurance in order to do this event. You can't put any financial limitation on free speech. You can't put any limiting regulation on free speech other than reasonable restrictions on time, place, and manner. But this is the perfect place, and all day sounds like a perfect time, and as long as we all mind our manners, we'll do fine today. So, I'm the organizer. My name is Jim Statzer. Call me J-Day, J-Day Statzer on Facebook. Everything that happens at this event today is on me. I'm the one that pulled the permit to use the Capitol. I have peace officers, volunteers below me. Their job is such. They are to interface with the people that come that I can't reach, especially if law enforcement or somebody negative comes. You need to interface with those people and help them participate in today's event. Tell them how long it is to stay here, where the march starts, things like that. But if somebody comes to you with a question that you don't want to answer or that you don't have the answer to, it's simple. All you got to do is point to me. Point to the guy in the organizer shirt, say, that's Jay. Go talk to Jay. He'll answer your question. I don't know what you're talking about. The other aspect is if you're one of my staff volunteers and you see something negative, somebody coming up to one of the participants, like a police officer trying to ask them questions that they don't need to be answering, you need to intercede in that situation, and you need to point that person to me so that I can protect the audience of this event. Because it's my job to make it as safe, fun, and easy as possible for you to participate in the movement. And we've got all day to do this. The Capitol is just one aspect of this event. We had a campus gathering that didn't really go this year because I'm still trying to find a campus organizer, not only to start campus chapters of the ACLU in Normal again, but also someone that I can train to be an organizer like myself, to come and organize people on campus, to have events on campus, to march around town. I'd like to see 200 people come to this event so we can march around the governor's mansion. It's going to have to build up though, and that's why this is an annual event. On the first Saturday of May, always the first Saturday of May, so it's easy to know when it is. And all you got to do is tell people, just come back on the first Saturday of May and the momentum will build. That's how these things work. But there's some rules to the rally. Now, obviously, I'm not asking you questions that are asking you to do things that are out of your own nature, but obviously don't bring weapons, don't bring fireworks, don't bring anything irresponsible here. Don't bring glass. If you have any litter, try to take your litter out with you. The place is clean here, so there's not going to be much of a cleanup after the rally today. But it's always important to leave the area that you demonstrate in better condition than you found it in. So that's what we want to do here. Now there are several positions that need to be filled in order to run a really good rally. And in my mind, past the organizer, the next important person is the person that runs the information table. Now we're not doing an information table or a tent or a booth here because the wind is our worst enemy. And it's just too much work. It's hard enough to keep the banners up with the wind. It's hard enough to keep the signs up with the wind. So we're not going to try to man a table. The person who mans the table is very important. They handle donations. They handle the t-shirts and things like that. They make sure that everybody that comes to the rally gets a copy of the official rally literature. It's very important to do that. And they make the contacts. They write down the phone numbers and names of people that want to help next year. We also need pairs of people to hold banners. Nothing draws a crowd like a banner. Banners are great. It's the number 2 thing after a sound system that gets attention. So you always want to have at least 6 people to hold up your core banners for the event. And then you want to make sure that everybody else that's attending is holding a sign or something to indicate why we're here. Everybody has a part to play in this, whether they're a participant or the core staff. And so, again, we're going to keep doing this every year and being consistent on our part so that when you tell your friends that this thing happens every year, you can be of your word. You can be believed when they come and see it year after year. And then eventually the people who come year after year decide to get more involved and they decide maybe they want to help the next year. And that's when the ball really gets rolling. That's when things really get nice. Now it's good to mark your peace officers or your core staff with t-shirts. Sometimes t-shirts are a trouble, so armbands can be used. Sometimes hats can be used. And actually for Nebraska, hats might be the way to go. But you need to have at least the organizer and a couple staff marked so that they can have, the authority, the draw that will bring them the ability to then make this event safe for the participant. As far as other rules, we'll go into how the march will work. At 4:20, we will depart from, actually at 4:20, I'll begin the speech that sets up the march. And then we're going to be marching on the sidewalks. Now, the sidewalk march that I do is sort of an occupation march. What I mean by that is, instead of everybody crowding together in one lump or in one single file line, you break the people up, because if you have them bunched together, that lowers your visibility. That has you occupying less space, less eyeballs can see you. So what I like to do is break people up into small groups with a sign for each group, send them on their way down the crosswalks, and use the crosswalk signs, the lights, to guide the march. So a peace officer at the very beginning should lead it off, and he goes with the first group of people to the first intersection and goes to the crosswalk light, and then waits there for 2 cycles of that light. On the second cycle, you cross over to the other side of the street, and then you wait there, because another group of people is going to take the position that that first peace officer was in at that first crosswalk light, and they're going to wait there for 2 cycles of the light after they get there, and then they're going to cross. So when they start to cross, the first group will then cross the street diagonally, or not diagonally, but cross the street perpendicularly to go across the other side, and there they will wait for 2 cycles of the light, and then they will continue down the street to the next crosswalk. So they're on the opposite side of the street as the starting block, and now a full block away. The second group takes the position the first group was in after crossing the street. A new group takes the position of the second group at the first intersection. And then we have another peace officer at that point to make sure that the groups don't bunch up together and they all keep a good separation going. But it all is based on the movement of the first group. When the first group moves, then when the crosswalk light is ready, the next groups move. Where you go down, we go down M Street and diagonal our way toward 22nd and P, where we will be having the after party at Union Plaza. Now, my plans for Union Plaza would be to have a larger event there, to set up booths and get the permit process going. But since that's not really public property, a lot of that's private property, you have to get a commercial permit. And so if I have to get a commercial permit, then I might as well organize a large commercial event, a fair, something different from a First Amendment demonstration, so that we would have two different types of events on the same day. That's what we're building to. But right now, we're just going to kind of take it easy. I know we've got medical people here that can't go that fast, and that's why we like to do the march real slow, give them time to catch up. And we want to basically not draw too much attention to ourselves at Union Plaza, because I understand that with these events, when people are kind of green and they haven't been to too many, they tend to get a little paranoid. They tend to think that they're being watched, and they don't like that. But you know, if you're never standing up to be counted, and you're never seen that way, you're never going to have an influence. Standing and being counted is one of the most powerful things that anybody can do, no matter what their class or social status. And standing and being counted is one of the scariest things to the people in power. They want to keep us separated. They want to keep us in fear. They want to keep us disorganized. They want to keep us contending with each other and having to be super diplomats with each other, when we have the common enemy that has no courtesy, no concern, no morals, no truth, no desire to do the right thing, only a desire to maintain their own power and their own profit motives. People power trumps money power. So when we get the people power, we won't need to pay for petitions. Because I mark my words, if we have to pay for signatures to get a petition on the ballot like our governor does, two things are going to come from that. First of all, it's not going to have the sincerity of volunteers gathering those signatures for free for an issue they believe in. It's going to just be basically low-income people writing down signatures so they can get some money. And you don't necessarily get the same quality signatures in a campaign like that. But what we got to do with the signatures right now, for instance, with the Nebraska Medical Initiative, we're gathering signatures, but we're basically doing this as an organizing tool right now. We know that it's going to be kind of late in the game to get the kind of signatures we need to make it pass, and we're going to have to come around again. But that's fair. We understand how that works. We're just not staffed up enough right now. We need more people. So come to this event, pull your car over and park. There's free parking on Saturday at the meters, and get yourself involved in this event. We have a situation in this country where any accusation made against us is considered fair game, and anything true that we say that's negative about their side is considered going too far. So we got to turn that around. We got to get the debate back to reason. We got to get the debate back to truth. So eventually, going to these events, you work out your rhetoric, and then maybe at some point you may decide you want to speak at one of these events. And there's always a need for people to get up and say things. There's always a need for people to give their testimony about their medical case or about their court case even. There's always a need for people to do the research at home and then come to the rally with what they've learned. I'm going to go into the history of LB 643 later today and show you what happened in the history of that and how secure it is, how curious the process is in the legislature. We'll get to that. We'll get to the people who voted against LB 643. We want to target them in this next election. We've got the Marijuana Party of Nebraska that's going to be on the ballot. They're very close in signatures. I imagine even by the end of the day they're going to have enough signatures. And so there will be a party that you can join, and as long as you set yourself up with an address in the targeted district, you can run in that district and maybe unseat somebody like Senator Williams, who is LB 643's greatest opponent. So that's what we really hope, is we get you involved in the rally, we teach you some leadership skills, we teach you some activism skills, but then we want you to go into politics. We want you to get involved, to lobby, but also to run for office. If you look at how unqualified some of these people are that the Koch brothers are putting in, and how unqualified our own governor is, you can't think that you're unqualified to run for the state senate. So think about it. Keep coming to these events. Of course, this isn't the only event. 420 in Omaha is another annual event. We have this same event happening in Chadron this year for the first time with Mark Elwith Jr. and the Legalized Marijuana Now party up there. manning another location. We used to have an Omaha location, but we decided to go with just a Lincoln this year, because this is really where we need to be. We need to be able to show this legislature, and I know they're not here, it's an empty building, but we're recording this so that we can give them the recording of what was said, and maybe then they'll get the message that these people are not happy with the inaction of the 11 senators and the 2 who didn't vote, who screwed up LB 643's chances for us. It's a shame that for an issue like cannabis medicine, they still have this ginned up controversy. It's the most obvious issue in the world, so why can't the Republicans in the House here in the unicameral support the obvious need of cannabis medicine? Well, it goes against their sponsors. You see, they're in the back pockets of the drug companies. They'll never be able to support any kind of cannabis reform as long as that's the case, and they absolutely need to be replaced. We've got people there who've been elected to high office in the state who are there basically to vote for one corporate interest and sit on their hands for the rest of their term. That's not governance. That's lapdog fascism, and it's going to stop when we get ourselves active. Later also I'm going to talk about our strategies moving forward, and a big start for our strategy moving forward is the youth vote. The youth vote is a powerful thing, and I'll be laying out the numbers to you to show you just how powerful they're. Basically what you're going to learn is there's more of us than there are of them. But they don't know that because too many of us don't vote. Too many of us don't even register to vote. So that's got to get fixed. So people, you got to realize that you can't complain about what's happening if you're not participating in the system. You can't just play or hate, you got to participate. And so that's what I'm asking you to do. Get more involved in any way you can. I don't know you, but you know yourselves. And whatever it is that you can do, that you know you can start right away and keep doing every day until we've solved this problem of cannabis prohibition, you pick that thing and start today, because that's what we need you to be doing. So if you can write letters to the editor. If you can speak, get up at a rally like this one and speak. If you're an artist, put it into your art. If you're just a voter, that's the most powerful thing of all. It seems like a little thing, but it's really where the rubber hits the road. You have to vote. You can also encourage other people to vote, because there's a lot of people that maybe need a ride to the polls or just may need somebody to give them that extra little nudge. And you can be that. You can be that motivator in your community. Cannabis Liberation Day as a First Amendment demonstration is an educational event. Anything that is sold here is being done at a donation basis, and it takes a pretty good amount of money to organize for this thing, and the more money we have, the more money we can apply next year to next year's event. Now, we have a lot of disadvantages when it comes to this kind of controversial issue. They won't let us advertise this event in the newspaper, and they won't let us advertise this event on the radio, because they will tell me, as the potential advertiser, that all I'm doing is putting out an ad that encourages drug use. Well, you don't need an advertisement to encourage drug use. People have got that pretty much figured out on their own. This is First Amendment speech, but apparently First Amendment speech still has some unfair limitations to it. So we're stuck with little quarter-page flyers. We're stuck with Facebook. We're stuck with the best thing, which is meeting people face-to-face and recruiting them face-to-face. We don't have the mass media effect, though, and we can get some news coverage here and there, and that's nice, but it's not advertising before the event to get people here. So we really have the deck stacked against us trying to put this event together, and that's where we need all of you to get the word of mouth working so that we can build this event up, and in a couple of years just absolutely fill this place. That's what's going to be required to get us some real progress here. But again, this is just a second annual. We've had these events before. We've had these events going back all the way to 2011. We just haven't had them successively every year, and again, that's why we don't have the momentum already built up. So we're starting from scratch here, and you know, it's not so bad to start from scratch. You got to start from somewhere, right? So keep coming to these events year after year. Make yourself a part of the discussion. Call your senators. write letters to the editors, get involved any way you know you can. And I just think this is our only way out, people. We can't rely on our legislature anymore. We have to be the legislature. We have to get these ballot initiatives going, because that's the only way that people can really get good legislation in this state now without a bunch of bad trading, bad horse trading, and bad poison pill amendments. How crazy that process has been. So I'm going to play a little more music here while I get some speakers set up. We have a couple people that are sick and can't be here. We're still hoping Ed Williams makes it here. But we're going to, again, push ahead with what we have. I know we've got Greg Lauby here today, and we have Jane Stanley who's going to come back. She had a bit of a medical problem too. So just a quick prayer for those who are sick today, and for those who are trying to come anyways, to give them the strength of the Holy Spirit to make it down here so that they can be heard and seen and be a part of this movement. Because that is what we're doing here. We're trying to build a movement again from scratch. We've got some of the same old people, and we got to get more and more new people, and we got to train them up. We got to train up a whole new generation of people to get politically active in this state and in all the other states as well. We should not get left behind. In Michigan, they're doing a ballot initiative to put all uses on the ballot. They've already legalized for medical. They could have legalized for all uses almost a decade earlier when they had the manpower. But because of a little state-sponsored murder, people got cold feet and got afraid. But eventually they came back, they trained up a new group of people, and that's what they're doing right now, the ballot initiative process in Michigan. In Michigan, it's much harder to get something on the ballot than it is here in Nebraska. I was shocked not only about the amount of time that you're allowed, up to 2 years, but also the low number of signatures you need. Now, a good signature collector should be able to gather 1,000 signatures in the space of 4 or 5 months. That's the kind of manpower we need. So if we need 20,000 signatures, 20 volunteers will do it. If we need 200,000 signatures, then we need 200 people to do it. The math is pretty easy, actually. The manpower is the hard part. So again, that's why we have these gatherings, to make ourselves accessible to the public, to make ourselves accessible to the people who are like-minded that want to help and just don't know how or where to start. This is where you start. On Cannabis Liberation Day, Lincoln Edition, 2016.
And it varies from area of Nebraska to area, but farmers are paying anywhere from $20 to $80 an acre in property taxes. So you got a high range, but in any event, the $3 decrease means practically nothing to them. This year, there was a much broadcast bill passed that increased tax credit from the states for property tax relief to agricultural land, and that amount was $20 million. This is after our governor insisted from the beginning of the legislature that property tax relief was his #1 priority, based on what he had heard touring the state and taking people's opinions. If you apply that $20 million uniformly across the ag and ranch land, it is 40 cents an acre. I call that a pittance. In fact, it may even be an insult. It's certainly not anywhere near property tax relief. And this year, the USDA is predicting that people who plant corn will suffer a $70 an acre loss by the time they harvest and go to market their corn, because of the extremely high carryover in bushels of corn available to the market already from last year's harvest. The same is much the same for soybeans, and the amount of loss is even higher for wheat. As a result of these kinds of economic conditions, the USDA reported that farmers' income fell 36% last year, and that was on top of a 16% decline the year before. Over the 2-year period of time, they report a loss of 1,300 small farms in Nebraska and over 100,000 acres being taken out of production completely. This is for the #1 revenue-producing industry in Nebraska. And everyone wants to give a lot of lip service to it, but they don't seem to recognize either the dire straits that it's presently in or the possible relief and hope that reformation of hemp legislation could provide. Jay used the term industrial hemp. Industrial hemp is defined by Congress and in the Nebraska statute as that cannabis which has less than 0.3% THC. So that there's really no psychoactive effect if you would ingest it. In fact, in 2001, when the Nebraska Agriculture Committee studied industrial hemp, they first looked at a bill that would allow individual growth of it up as long as it was below the 0.3% THC. After the conclusion of their hearings, when the final bill came out and was referred to the floor, they upped the THC level to 1%, saying that even consumption of a 1% wouldn't affect your mental processes, your judgment, your perception, your coordination. I think there's certainly no reason that I can imagine why anyone would oppose offering industrial hemp as is presently defined as an agricultural crop. 0.3% is like 3 mills to $1. And I don't know very many people outside of county assessors who do real estate tax calculations who really even understand what a mill is. It's so hard to find. So I just want to confirm what Jay has said. I would also like you to realize that hemp, in terms of its environmental impact, is probably the most friendly environmental crop that a farmer can decide to raise. Number one, it restores nitrogen back into the ground the way alfalfa does, which is an extraordinarily valuable thing if you're going to follow that crop up with planting either soybeans or corn. Secondly, it in most circumstances requires no application of herbicide or insecticide or fungicide, dramatically decreasing your input costs, although it also dramatically decreases the amount you have to spend to Monsanto or some other chemical supplying company. As far as irrigation goes, there's a number of things that have been said about it. If you notice, the feral hemp that Jay was referring to, growing in Lancaster County, and which you can find all the way practically to the Colorado border, that grows without any irrigation. One of the major costs for a farmer to raise a crop, whether it's pivot or surface education, is trying to operate that irrigation well. And that's true whether he's doing it by diesel fuel or electricity. The substantial costs of irrigation are really a major part of crop production, which can be done away with for growing a crop of hemp, at least in most parts of Nebraska, under normal climate conditions. So in order really to grow a crop, what is necessary is that you have to plant it. You can use the same drill planter that you would be using for wheat or alfalfa with just a slight modification. and then you wait 70 to 90 days and harvest it. And again, with a slight modification, you can either harvest it by applying a windrower and an alfalfa baler, or you can run it through a modified combine. In Europe, they use a John Deere combine or a case, and that leaves the stalks in a windrow behind, but then they come and bale up. I've also seen YouTube videos where combines have been modified so that they have a high head that harvests the seed off the tops of the plant, and then a lower head that cuts the stalk closer to the ground and leaves the stalk behind for use as fiber and herbs. Speaking of which, Diane Wolf was willing to cart today some stalks from feral hemp, and you can see the kind of growth that they get just growing outside without, again, herbicide, fertilizer, any kind of spray or irrigation. And what? Those are like 13 feet tall, aren't they, Deanna? Close to that? Yeah. So you can imagine what whole fields would look like if we had that. Now, the question is, every farmer is going to insist on knowing his market before he plants a seed. Jay talked about seed being $20 a pound, if I recall right, as a rough average of what seed might be now. In Colorado, there was a field that was visited by a couple of state senators and a group of interested people. And the farmer there was growing 8 acres of industrial hemp. And his statement was, I'm going to harvest it all for seed, and I'm going to use that seed to plant 80 acres next spring. So you can get an idea of how fast we can overcome what's really a worldwide seed shortage. If we can somehow free American farmers to plant on American ground, maybe some of that 100,000 acres in Nebraska were lost for production because it wasn't economically feasible to continue to plant crops. So now I promised to talk about the marketing. The Hemp Industries Association, a national group working towards reformation of hemp laws, estimates that in the United States alone last year, during just the last year, there was $620 million worth of hemp products sold through retail outlets. You're probably familiar with it as some lotions that are everything from in Cuscators and Walmart to Walgreens and other specialty shops. There's widespread distribution of those products that at least have some element of hemp in it. That's generally coming from the pressed oil from seeds. In Canada, which is one of the major exporters, China, interestingly enough, is the main importer into the United States of hemp material and products. But in Canada, their growers estimate that they're making anywhere from about $250 an acre to $400, and some have reported income and profit as high as $1,000 an acre, depending on whether or not they're able to market genetic seed that they can guarantee has not been sprayed for over 3 years. They market right now about 80% of their hemp for seed that then goes into the manufacture of retail products. And it is becoming a significant factor in their balance of trade because they are able to import many of those products. Think about how Canada is, both by limitations of climate their short growing season, the coldness that prevails, and by their available acres compared to what the lower 48 in the United States has. It gives you some glimpse of what we could be doing in a very short order of time. And frankly, Nebraska has an optimal climate and soil conditions for raising hemp. This is not a new product. Washington grew it. Thomas Jefferson imported it from China. The Pilgrims carried seed of it when they came to America. John Adams grew it. Betsy Ross made the American flag out of hemp cloth. Most early Americans wore hemp cloth. They lit their lamps and burnt oil from it. It made their ropes and string and sails. In the 1600s, colonies made it a crime not to grow it. Drafts of the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution and most newspapers were written on it. All this when Ben Franklin, who made paper from it, was hunting for electricity with a kite on a string, and the steam engine hadn't even been thought of yet. With the technology that electricity and combustion engines bring us, and our understanding of scientific principles and technology, we could easily obtain what many claim are the 25,000 different uses of hemp to make products that would include not just the obvious cloth and paper, but even superconductors, and replace plastic and rubber products so that you have products that are as durable while they're in use as plastics and rubber products, but are biodegradable when they are discarded. Now the question becomes, what is our government waiting for? Certainly, our current governor and his attorney general are more determined to continue to expend, without any specific authorization from the legislature or the people, public funds trying to command what our friendly neighbor to the west, what laws that neighbor chooses to enforce, and which is really something. When you think about it, one state trying to tell another what laws they have to enforce, not even the federal government can do that to a state. They have to enter into a voluntary agreement from the state to enforce federal regulations. Generally, they have to get some benefit from it. Instead, so that's been the stance of our Attorney General and our President. They have done everything that they can to suppress him, including approving the Department of Agriculture regulations, which were supposed to be written to allow research plots of hemp. This was done under a federal statute that Mitch McConnell helped put through Congress. And in his home state, Kentucky, when the DEA seized seeds, the Attorney General of Kentucky, together with the head of the Department of Agriculture, immediately filed suit against the DEA on grounds that funding had been denied them by Congress for interfering with programs under 7606 of the 1914 Federal Farm Bill, and that their seizure of seeds being imported from Kentucky was a violation of that restriction. As I understand it, the case was settled with the understanding that the Kentucky Agriculture Department would file for a DEA permit, and that permit would be instantly approved. The programs here, first of all, the Department of Agriculture refused to conduct any research pilot programs themselves or allow any individual landowners to do so. They then entered into conferencing with the University of Nebraska rather than any other university to write rules that were beneficial to both. Among those rules were that only university employees or students, which had to be identified in the application, could be part of the project, and that they had to have all applicable government permits, including federal, before they could even make application for a project. There are, I understand, 2 university professors, experts in the area of plant biology and alternate crop production plants, who are enthusiastic about trying to research the possibilities of hemp, but they cannot get DEA approval. Now, we don't know whether or not that's because of the governor and the Attorney General's opposition. That then has been communicated to the federal authorities and discouraged them from granting the permit. The only response apparently that the university professors are getting is silence. That's also the case with the medical marijuana program that was authorized by the legislature last year. There was a small research project that the University of Nebraska Medical Center was authorized to conduct under Senator Crawford's bill that would have allowed them to admit a few epilepsy patients that were absolutely incurable by any other method, and see whether or not there was any positive response through the administration of a very limited form of cannabis. That form, by the way, would have come from industrial hemp or qualified as industrial hemp. But it's my understanding that they still have not gotten DEA approval, despite trying to comply with repeated demands from the DEA for more information, or in the last instance, a bigger safe to store the cannabis materials. Again, we don't know whether or not that's because of personal opposition by the governor and the attorney general or not, but certainly they aren't stepping in to assist that program to begin research. So one of the other things that Jay said today is eminently true. It is up to us now. We cannot count on the executive branch of the governor and the legislative branch, although there were 30 that voted for Senator Garrett's medical marijuana bill, 9 of those are going to be term limited out. And so they will not be returning in the future of the legislature. There are 25 seats altogether that will be up for election. That constitutes a majority. And historically, the governor has been quite active in trying to promote his chosen candidates for legislative seats. It is reported that he has gone out and actively recruited some opponents already. And again, historically, he's been quite liberal in making donations to candidates that he supports. In this state, that can make an incredible difference. It is also the fact that one of the most frequently discussed topics in the state, the status of the death penalty, is on the ballot. And it is expected that that will result in an abnormally high turnout of those who may be more conservative than liberally or progressively or reform-leaning individuals. Whether those predictions are true, of course, only the future will tell us. But what it does suggest is that we need to get out and really work hard to try and identify candidates who will be supportive of cannabis and then in turn support them. Jay, I guess the only other thing I would say is that remember, a seed is a living organism. if you, for some unknown reason, happen to come across some, don't throw them in the trash or don't flush them down the toilet. Cast them out on the ground where a bird may find it and gain some nourishment from it. Not only are cannabis seeds a wonderful human source of food, they're superb for the birds. Anything else you want me to comment on, Jay?
Just wrap it up.
Okay. Well, I can talk a little bit more. Jay is kind enough not to cut me off. One of the things that I want to say is that putting together something like this is almost a Herculean task. And this is the second year Jay's done it. You know, he's been able to provide a wonderful sound system. This is one of the best outdoor sound systems I've ever had the pleasure of speaking in. And, you know, he has done everything he can to circulate the announcement about this event and encourage people to join in. And he has made it certainly a very welcoming place for me. You will also notice as he was talking about the march, he knows how to organize a march so that the people in it are safe, as well as the traffic that's passing by is relatively is not interfered with. Yeah. And Jay, I just can't commend you enough for doing this event again this year. Thank you. Thank you. I would like, I guess, if we have a few more minutes, to talk about the naming of the plant. We know that it has a long history. The English word for it, dating back as far as I can find, has always been hemp. Up in 1753, a scientist in the area, which is now Switzerland, called the plant cannabis. That was a scientific name that matched in with the nomenclature that he was assigning to almost every plant that he could find and identify. And those scientific names have been adopted by the scientific community and have been used by them ever since. However, the Rastafari and others believe the plant is the herb, and that it is mentioned repeatedly in the Bible and the Old Testament. For example, in Genesis 3:18, some translations read, "Thou shalt eat the herb of the field." And there are similar admonitions that are attributed to the Creator in instructing the Jewish community. But the government has named this plant marijuana in the 1930s. Well, not the whole plant. What they did was they said most of the parts of the plant and the extracts from the plant we're going to call marijuana because it was a Mexican term that apparently meant feel good. But why that term was picked, I don't know, whether it was a popular term in the terminology slang of the era or a pipe dream that Henry Anslinger, as chairman of the Narcotics Bureau, made up. But it became defined in statute. Now, they have made a type of the cannabis plant industrial hemp, as though it came from a steel or an automobile factory. For me, the plant is hemp. Historically, it was not used to alter consciousness. That's something that apparently came along in much more recent times. And I'm not sure whether the original hemp plants even had that capacity, or whether that's been the result of crossbreeding and environmental conditions. And for our discussion, it's not really important. There is a substantial distinction between it and what we think of as the marijuana plant. Hemp is planted very tightly close together so that it tends to grow up in stalks like Deanna brought, and only have a small flowering plot at the top where any knowledgeable marijuana grower is going to separate his plants so that it can grow out in all directions and more attain a shape more like a Christmas tree that then produces a lot of flowering tops. So there is a genetic difference that can be readily identified through scientific testing. So it's not as though if we were going to allow hemp as an agricultural crop, it couldn't be distinguished readily from that had a high THC content that some elements of our society seem so determined to prohibit anyone from enjoying. We don't know what God called it, but we do know He created it, and I maintain that He created it for the use of mankind. We also know the truth of the American observation that in all things of nature, there is something of the marvelous. And that was Aristotle that managed to write that observation down. It's certainly true about over 35 industrial countries allow their farmers to grow it, and that includes Canada, the European Union countries, and China. We import their products. Senator Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, and 12 others, including Rand Paul and Bernie Sanders, if you can believe they would agree on something, want to remove him from the Federal Controlled Substance Act, and they have a bill pending in the Senate to do that now. That is co-sponsors regularly. There is a similar bill in the House that now is up to 63 co-sponsors. And both of these measures are drawing bipartisan support. And of course, as you know, Bernie Sanders early in the campaign stated that he wanted marijuana taken off the controlled substance statute entirely. Hillary Clinton, the last I knew, the position she was taking at that time was that she thought it could be removed from the Schedule 1 and perhaps placed on a Schedule 2 so that there could be more research done. I haven't clearly heard Donald Trump's position, but I understand he's willing to leave it to the states. And I certainly hope that's the case. Both parties came together last December and again stopped funding for the Department of Justice and the DEA enforcement of any federal prohibitions on any medical marijuana or industrial hemp activity, which was in compliance with their state statutes and regulations. So, like the 300,000 49ers who rushed to California when gold was discovered, like the immigrants preparing for the signing of the Homestead Act in 1862, at least 24 other states have altered their legal status of industrial hemp and reclassified it and to get ready to unleash their farmers and processors to begin to work with the plant. 9 other states planted last spring. And more will be planting or have already planted this spring. Kentucky farmers are raising hemp. I think this is the 3rd year now. And I believe that they licensed 4,500 acres in Kentucky for the growth of industrial. Vermont, North Dakota, Colorado, Oregon, but not Nebraska. Nebraska seems to be the last horse at this trough. And I think it will be to the detriment of our rural economy, especially if other states lock up the relationships so that they have first dibs on the seed supply, and Nebraska can't get a good supply of seed once they do decide that it's something that is as beneficial as in fact it is. might add too that retail sales, this again is from the Hemp Industries Association, but retail sales in North America, Canada all through Central down to South America, are expected to exceed $1 billion this year. And it's my understanding Uruguay has completely legalized marijuana. So you can tell that Portugal has done the same with pretty much all drugs. There is a pending conference at the United Nations that's trying to re-examine the status of what are now considered to be controlled substances. Because if there is something that is clearly failed, as much as the Vietnam War did, it is the war on drugs. And I haven't looked up the figures about which has cost us the most, either in lives and damaged families or public funds. But I suspect that actually the war on drugs may be a higher expense, given the fact that its duration has been since the Nixon years in 1970. So I guess I would just leave you with some thoughts. I've already mentioned a couple of things that I think are...
Okay, and now, to cover the medical issue base, we've got Jane Stanley here. I'm going to have to cut the feedback a little bit, so let me adjust this.
Okay. Hello, hello. 1, 2, 3. Okay, everybody, I'm sorry I have to go against the plan here, but I'm unable to stay any longer. I'm Jane L. Stanley, and I am a patient. I have interstitial cystitis, which is a chronic pain condition of my bladder. A recent study in that Prevention, did on the top 10 worst pain conditions. Cancer was number 6, interstitial cystitis was number 3. There is no cure, and the only thing that I can do is be on medications that will keep me comfortable. As of November of 2015, I no longer take any pain medications. I am off 19 of the 23 medications I was on. My mind is clear. I do meditation, Reiki, and I do self-hypnosis. And I refuse to go on pain medications anymore. I've even been able to go back to school and get my master's in marijuana as medicine.
Yeah, anything. Oh God.
And I want every senator, especially Senator Garrett and Les Seiler, because you are my senator. This is the face of chronic pain. It's every day. We have to live life minute by minute. Can you imagine being 13, 15, and 18 and watching your mother screaming dysplasia. And we got that fixed with double diaper.
I thought it looks like it's, maybe it's an hour or so.
My son Anthony, he was diagnosed with exercise-induced asthma at 13, and I was at work, and I got a call from my son. You have to excuse me. The pain is really, really horrible right now, and my train of thought is not there right now. And we found out that he had an allergic reaction when he called me at work. And something in his voice told me to help. When I got there, his lips and fingernails were blue. I panicked a little bit, ran to the phone, was going to call 911. And I decided I was going to take him to the hospital instead. And I sped down the street, and our Heavenly Father closed his ways so that I could praise him. He fought for over 4 hours. They are putting cannabinoids in the puffers, and they are doing a lot better on this medication. We now know that there is enough research. All you have to do is and put in cannabinoids or cannabis and click enter, and it will take you to all the research out there. The government no longer calls cannabis an addiction, but you now have cannabis use disorder, and they are now trying to make a synthetic drug to treat your cannabis use disorder. How ridiculous. And senators, Governor Pete Ricketts, Attorney General Doug Peterson, and Matt Williams, you should all be ashamed of yourselves. Senator Garrett, look at this pain. I'm not the only Nebraskan that is in my situation. I am the face of the faceless of Nebraska.
Yeah!
Our civil
Yes!
rights have been violated too long.
Goddamn
You know you have the proof. I've been sending it to all of you in the last 2 years. This is ridiculous. We have a senator and attorney general that went and illegally tried to buy drugs for the death penalty. Sodium bipentol. Illegal in the United States for the death penalty. But they broke state, federal, and international laws.
Shame
And
on
we
them!
have the nerve to lock up cannabis users.
Shame on
Fuck
them!
them!
Shame on them!
And we have vets that are in prison now because their PTSD is not treated properly, or even the veterans are not diagnosed them with PTSD because they can make more money on other diagnoses. Excuse me.
I'm gonna beg the cops to give me a kiss.
We love you!
I love you too, Diane. So 2.5 years after
Ask them to give me one so I can put it on Facebook.
I was diagnosed with interstitial, well, let me go back. It took 14 years to be diagnosed. My pain attacks were just once in a while, and in 2000 they became more and more. I went to all the doctors, and finally Dr.
Are they
Pancraft,
all that high right now?
got me prepared for a diagnosis of colon cancer, which at the time, there was a 10% chance that you would live. And interstitial cystitis. I asked my doctor, what is interstitial cystitis? He said, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So, being the researcher that I am, I looked it up. And when I pulled myself away from my computer, I was in tears. And when I went to my specialist, I told them that I'm prepared for colon cancer or interstitial cystitis, and I know exactly what it is because I've looked it up. We did the biopsy. He didn't even have to look under the microscope because the mast cells were everywhere. And he looked me in my eyes and said, you should have wished for colon cancer because at least there's a slight chance of a cure or you'll die. At least you'll be out of pain. So my children have watched me go from a woman who, by my side of my husband, was able to learn how to work on motorcycles. We started riding when I was 18, and I really loved when he taught me how to ride. I loved his arms around me. And then he taught me how to work on motors. I helped him rebuild our 325 small block Chevy. I've done almost everything with my husband. And when I was raising my children, I didn't want a computer in our house. I didn't want the internet. I was the Girl Scout leader from kindergarten to 6th grade. And I helped with Boy Scouts. We raised our kids, you know, you live a healthy life and you do good. You become a good citizen to a community. All along, believing that cannabis had no medical purposes. And as I researched, I find out that there is plenty of research. In 1938 and 39, I'm almost positive of the dates. The LaGuardia Committee was formed in New York, which proved that what the government was saying was false. Then in 1970, Nixon formed the Schaefer Commission. Governor Schaefer, he was a bulldog. And he took this position very serious. There were 33 people on this commission. Nixon, being the funny guy that he is, hid voice-activated microphones all over the White House. And we have his meetings, his voice telling us that we know cannabis is safe, but they don't. Cannabis is not illegal because of research. It is illegal because of greed, of our governors and our senators, our presidents, and anyone who is involved in keeping this plant out of our hands. This plant was put on this earth for a reason. We have an endocannabinoid system for a reason. There's a reason the CB1 receptors in our brain and the CB2 receptors throughout our body take and need THC, even large amounts of THC. You can use even the highest THC strains without getting high. Yes, that's right. You heard me right. You can get the highest THC strains without getting high. This is done by fresh eating and juicing. I know this is going to shock a lot of you, but I have said, and I will continue to say, that we need cannabis from fetus to grave.
Yes.
I don't think it hurts anyone.
No, it does not hurt.
I know people that smoked it since they were 5 years old. They look totally fine, you know?
Yes, that is because cannabis was made for our bodies.
Our brain has a special receptor for it, right?
Yes, CB1 receptors. And I want you to know that CBD does not work on the endocannabinoid system, but on other receptors in our body. Many researchers do not call it the endocannabinoid system anymore, but the immunocannabinoid system, because cannabis is needed for every life function in our body. Your governors and your senators and everyone against cannabis will tell you that it damages your brain, or they'll say it changes the chemistry of your brain. Yes, it does change the chemistry of your brain. It changes it for the better. And there's memory loss. That is short term. And it's only if you're not
Fuck yeah.
used to the THC that you wouldn't it be wonderful healing your children before the damage is done? Every single medication that's out there is synthetic for something that cannabis can do. Then we have U.S. patents on cannabis. The invention is cannabinoids. For healing our body. Excuse me, when did this government invent plant cannabinoids? You certainly did invent the healing properties of cannabinoids, but yet you have an illegal, worthless patent. The 1930 Plant Act is very clear that only patents are available for GMO plants. That is why our government is trying to make GMO cannabis. And I'm sorry, we are now seeing the effects of these genetically modified plants and insects that our government has created. The Zika virus has come from a mosquito that was genetically modified to kill the mosquitoes that carried malaria. I don't know about you, but I think our government is doing more harm than good to the citizens of this state. Then we have the Senator Tommy Garrett, who is presenting this bill. And LD 643 started out to be a workable bill, but I look for bills grow, to smoke, to eat, to drink, however we want to use this plant. You have lied to us about cannabis. January 6, 1964, Dr. Raphael isolated THC. My birthday is January 6th, and my mother and father named me Jane. In Spanish, that is Juana. I would have to say this is the road to destiny from the day I was born.
Thank God someone's doing it. Sorry to interrupt you, but I said thank God someone's doing it.
The government knows that cannabis helps all these different conditions. Their patents show it in black and white. Cannabinoids for a neuroprotectant. What does this mean? This means that parents that have children with Dravet syndrome, cannabis, even very high THC cannabis, is needed for your child. This bill, LB 643, is now a synthetic cannabinoid bill. You ask me, how do I know this? Our senators have amended this bill to be a pharmaceutical monopoly bill, because only licensed pharmacists can dispense this cannabis product. They're claiming it's plant-based, but no pharmacist can touch a Schedule I drug. Shame on you. Then you sit here and you call those who choose to stoners and dopers. I'm sorry, they are cannabis consumers. Just like you are alcohol consumers. Do you call everyone that has a drink here and there an alcoholic and drunk? No, you do not. So don't put all of us or any of us in a category of stoners or dopers, because we know the truth. You lied to us. You have frightened many Americans with the yellow journalism that is still going on from 1937. One of the first commercials with Mary J. Anslinger stated the official truth: if you smoke it, you will kill people. Then a few years later, oh God. Can someone remind me where I left off?
Does she have a supply that companies?
Well, our Father's going to give me the words here. So, why should parents have to watch children go through what I'm going through? Did you know that the FDA has approved your children as young as 11 to go on Oxycontin
Shame.
and methadone,
Shame.
morphine? I am an adult grown woman. I was on Oxycontin for 2 weeks, and I called my doctor and said I refuse to take this medication anymore because of the hallucinations and the feeling of not being in control it had on me. And they're approving this for children. Did you know that Adderall And this is what your government has your children on. Not to mention the many other drugs that they put your children on for a psychosis. You're giving your children speed. Haven't we learned from methamphetamines when someone gets addicted, the damage it does? And you're putting your children on this? Oh my goodness. Pharmaceutical drugs kill hundreds of thousands of people a year. Alcohol kills hundreds of thousands also. It's not just car accidents, which are usually what's reported, but from damage done in the body. The wonderful thing about cannabis is that when you smoke it or eat it and you drink, THC has this property that is able to rebuild the brain cells in your brain. THC also keeps the damage of stroke isolated in a compartmentalized zone in your brain. So damage is not as bad, and you will recover a lot better. Now we hear about our veterans with PTSD, but we don't really hear about complex PTSD. The first time I said this in public was when I testified in front of Congress here in the Capitol for the unicameral. And they had us sitting there for 5 hours. That's as long as I could stay. I had to interrupt the flow of the meeting.
Okay, Lincoln, I'm back. This is the part of the day that I was really looking forward to doing the most. I want to give you the story of LB 643 because it's been quite an adventure. LB 643 started out with AM 680, the original version of LB 643, which was 73 pages. You go and look at that, and it takes 73 pages to close all the loopholes that law enforcement could use to bust people anyway. But that had to be modified, of course, to get support from the more corporatist members of this House. So we went through 5 iterations where they practically rewrote the entire bill, at least more than half of it rewritten each time, to try to get this thing through. Senator Howard worked really well with Senator Garrett to work on these things and get them posted, but we had some bad players in this. You mentioned, Jane mentioned Senator McCoy. Senator McCoy put bad amendments into LB 643 and then voted against it. That's insincere, that's undermining the will of the people, and it's just typical sick political games. Senator Glore amended to remove presumption of compliance on the part of patients. He repeated some of the protections, but also struck huge fees. He struck the huge fees that were in there, and also twice removed non-discrimination at work. So he did some good things as far as the fees, but then he also said that you could be discriminated at work for your medical marijuana status. And that's just plain wrong. The idea that if you show up at work under the influence of marijuana, you can't work. Well, some people need to be under the influence of marijuana just to get up, just to function. I think what they're trying to say is you shouldn't go to work intoxicated, or you shouldn't go to work too high to do your performance. But that does not mean that you can't have any cannabis in your system in order to work. That's just nonsense. And for the people that have chronic pain, chronic conditions that need that cannabis, you can't tell them, well, you can medicate yourself when you're at home, but when you're at work, you can't medicate yourself. That's nonsense. Anybody can medicate themselves safely and effectively with cannabis, titrating their dose 1 toke at a time. It's not like alcohol, people. It's not a debilitating thing to be under the influence of cannabis. McCoy gave us Amendment 1711, which said that insurance companies are not allowed to pay for cannabis. He changed the word allowed from required, so that not only was it not good enough for him that they not be required to pay, he says he doesn't even want an insurance company to be able to pay for your cannabis medicine expenses. That's nonsense. No other medicine has to deal with that hypocritical restriction. McCoy did put in a good bill, a good amendment, and that was in AM 1726, that said that you couldn't have a conflict of interest between a healthcare provider and the companies that would manufacture cannabis medicine and the caregivers. That was good, but that failed. He wasn't able to put that protection in there. And then you've got Mello with Amendment 2844, which was passed right away because that was the guy who figured out, oh, we got to figure out how we're going to pay for this stuff, so he put in the money appropriations. And then Christ gave us AM 2869, which would have imposed a 33% extra sales tax on cannabis medicine. Absolutely sick money-grubbing political move, and of course it failed. Williams then, with motion 273, decided that they were going to bracket or put on the shelf LB 643 until April 20th, 2016, starting April 20th, 2016, possibly to never return. That bill is so damaged. Our legislature has demonstrated such an inability to give us a clean bill that LB 643 is dead, in my opinion, now. It's going to be up to the people to do this with the ballot initiative process, and when we do those ballot initiatives, we're done going just medical only. This need of ending cannabis probation is not child's play. Yes, you have your kid with the seizures, and I understand that's important, but you know what? There's other people who have kids that are sitting in prison for no good reason, and that's pretty bad for your health too. I will not condone or join the efforts of any organization working in this movement who feel it necessary to throw the entire rest of the movement under the bus in order to get their one little issue taken care of. You will not get to where you're trying to go with the medical marijuana bill any faster than you would if you went with recreational. And if you have recreational, you avoid all the legislation, all the requirements that are in the bills like LB 643. You can have a very succinct bill. Instead of 73 pages, all you simply need to do is follow Bernie Sanders' example. Bernie said that cannabis needs to be removed from the schedule of controlled substances on the federal level. Well, I went and did some reading. Turns out that that list of controlled substances is also in Nebraska law, and that all prohibition of cannabis in Nebraska hinges on Nebraska's controlled substances list. So if you remove cannabis from that list, you have decriminalized it. You don't have to worry about loopholes where cops can arrest anyways, because it is no longer a controlled substance. It will then be returned to the status of a food. And if FDA has anything to say about cannabis, it can only regulate it as a food because it is not a drug. As we've said so many times before, cannabis is the anti-drug. It's the stepping stone away from hard drugs, whether you're a patient or a recreational user. And it is the gatekeeper that keeps your kids from going on to the harder stuff. So let us publicly humiliate the 15 people who voted against LB 643. Of course, Senator Brash, The one who said on YouTube, on my famous YouTube brash gaffe, that it would be horrible for children with seizures to use cannabis rather than have their brains cut out in partial lobotomies, because she's concerned with whether they will have a life going forward. Senator Brash somehow thinks a lobotomy is better for a kid's health than a little bit of cannabis that actually solves the problem. So maybe Brash should take her own medicine and get herself a lobotomy, if she hasn't already. Senator Groen. You'd think it would be spelled G-R-O-A-N, but it's G-R-O-E-N-E. And he voted against this. By the way, Brash is District 16, Groen is District 42. Senator Kintner, let me get that right so the right person is embarrassed. District 2. Senator McCoy, who's got kind of a mixed record with this, but in general and in total, his influence on LB 643 has been a negative one. And he finally voted against it, and he is District 39. Senator Stinner, District 48. Senator Fox, who's also been mentioned here for some foxy tricks in the hen house. That's District 7. Senator Hughes, District 44. Senator Coulterman, District 24. Senator Reep, R-I-E-P-E, should be rape, because that's what he did to our legal system. He's District 12. Senator Watermeyer, another consistent actor in our legislation. Watermeyer is District 1. Senator Friesen, District 34, another person who's been a bad actor in all of this. Senator Johnson, District 23. Senator Kuhn, District 38. Senator Seiler, Jane Stanley's senator, who's had one of the few senators who's heard directly from a suffering constituent and couldn't change their mind. Just can't respond to living proof. No, they want to wait 10, 20 years for FDA to provide proof. It doesn't work that way. This is not a drug after all, this is a solution. Senator Williams, who has been an opponent to LB 643 ever since the Judicial Committee, the only member of the Judicial Committee not to pass the bill. Senator Williams made his stake by trying to make cannabis-infused foods an instant felony. In a state where cannabis is basically decriminalized up to an ounce or a pound, he said that any amount of THC in an edible product should all of a sudden become a felony. And he had the gall to say at the Judiciary Committee that a child could potentially die from eating a cannabis gummy bear. It's that level of ignorance that almost cleared the room with the guffaws and the laughs and the cries of derision. These people are listening to the liars in law enforcement. Now, a couple decades ago, law enforcement had the gall to think that they were doctors and that they could say whether somebody's use was medical or not, and apparently nobody's use was ever medical for them. Now, the police think they're legislators. Law enforcement was never intended to write their own laws any more than our soldiers were intended to write their own orders. You obey the law as it's written and you leave it alone when they're trying to debate a law that increases the freedom and the health and the welfare of the people of Nebraska. You don't come into our Judiciary Committee with a laundry list of 1930s era propaganda that has been discredited so many times. And I tell you what, the senators aren't buying it anymore either. They have no respect for our governor. They have no respect for our attorney general anymore. They've overplayed their hand. When they come and they attack the hemp bill for the farmers, they'll use the same lies and the same stupid rhetoric they tried to use on LB 643. They can't even update their debate for the subject at hand. All they know is that they've got nothing to say about cannabis and they won't shut up about it. Cannabis is the anti-drug for so many reasons. I like to pick a few. Cannabis, for instance, is not fatal. Jane covered that pretty well with the facts. Enough said, you can't overdose on cannabis because cannabis is the anti-drug. But I'll go a little bit further. You cannot get addicted to cannabis. Cannabis does not create deficits in receptor sites in your dopamine pathways. Cannabis works like a dream. Cannabis is nothing but a big daydream. The first couple of hits of cannabis, your brain releases all available melatonin, and you can measure that by your EKG, which will show the alpha state brainwave. The alpha state is the best brainwave you can achieve. Nobody on heroin or cocaine has their brainwaves go into the alpha state. Only with cannabis does this happen, because cannabis is not an addictive drug, it is the anti-drug. But beyond that, because REM sleep, which is brought on by melatonin, is the healthiest and most healing thing that your brain does, and it does it every night. When you're an addict and you're trying to quit cold turkey, which is still the state-of-the-art drug treatment in America, it's that accumulation of nights of full sleep, that REM cycle sleep, that does reset the receptor sites in your brain. It does give your brain a chance to go down to the DNA level and rebuild itself based on what's supposed to be there. Enough nights of abstinence and full sleep will allow somebody to quit drugs cold turkey, but it's an awful long and cruel and arduous process in the way. Now, I'm not here to tell you about Ibogaine today, but when we're decriminalizing cannabis, it might be a good idea that when we're descheduling cannabis, we should deschedule Ibogaine as well and allow the FDA to come to Nebraska, encourage the FDA even to come to Nebraska, so that they can do the phase 2 approval trials for Ibogaine, which will require healing thousands of Nebraska methamphetamine addicts. If you're not in favor of what we're doing here, you're part of the problem.